code with, I have also been tasked to write another, and another person too has been tasked to write another, but we are using the same file. How is that going to be? Without any of these things that we are going to talk about, it's not going to be possible. Because then in a typical scenario, what would have to happen is that you create your own file, I create mine, and whoever is also part of the team will create theirs. Then one person will take it upon themselves to copy and paste the content into one file. And that is a lot of work to be done. For that matter, we need a way to synchronize the content that is coming in. And to have a very efficient system to do that, that is what brought about the introduction of Git as a technology. So Git is a source control management technology that helps us solve these two problems that I have illustrated. Okay, so the commonest question that you get people asking is, what is the difference between Git and GitHub? I haven't talked about GitHub so far. What I've mentioned is Git. And I'm saying Git is just a technology that helps us manage our source code or create versions of the code that we are working with. So that at any point in time, you can always revert back to some previous code that we had. It's like it keeps a history of all the codes you have written so that you can always go back to it. So as a software engineer, maybe today you are writing code, you've written the code which is working as in the example I stated earlier. Tomorrow you come and you are doing something, maybe you are debugging and you end up breaking the code. It is no longer working, even though it was working yesterday. So if you have this technology, which is Git, helping you to control the source code or keeping the history of your code or the various versions of your code, you can always get access to it. GitHub, on the other hand, isn't necessarily the technology. It is just an interface that helps you use this technology efficiently. And not just that, in simple terms, you can say GitHub is just a website, okay? A website where you are able to keep your codes. But the underlying technology in this website is Git. So it helps you are managing your code, but where are you storing it? You and I can decide to manage our code without using GitHub. So with the power of Git, I can equally manage my source code, the versions, create versions of my code on my own computer. But in the second scenario, when I say that if all of us are working for the same company and we are working remotely, we need to synchronize our codes. If you control your code on your computer and I do my own on my computer, there is no way to condense and synchronize the code. So GitHub is just a website where all of us can push our code. Then with the power of Git, we are able to synchronize the code on that GitHub platform so that at any point in time, any of us can have access to it. Then also the other advantage is that as a software engineer, everywhere you go, you have access to your codes because of GitHub. So see it as GitHub is just a website where you store your codes, as simple as that. Let me take that again. GitHub is just a website where you store the codes that you write. But then the underlying technology that you are using to help you manage the source code or to create versions of your code is Git. I hope that makes sense. And hopefully you'll be able to distinguish between Git and GitHub. GitHub is a website. You use it to store your codes. And the underlying technology that helps you manage your source code, your create versions of your code, and be able to synchronize code from various workers together in a team is Git. So Git is a technology. GitHub is just a website. All right. Now there are very important concepts or terminologies that you need to understand to be able to efficiently use Git and GitHub. So let me just go straight in explaining those terminologies. The first thing that I'll talk about is a repository. So let me first of all talk about a repository. If you have ever encountered Git or GitHub anywhere at all, repository is the first thing you are going to hear. So everybody says create your repository, create your repository. What at all is it? It is nothing new than your normal directory or folder if you are using a Windows machine, as you call it. So it's simply like a folder that you are creating. And inside that folder, you can have multiple files in there. You can have subfolders, okay? But in Git, that is known as a repository. And we are going to use that term to help us distinguish our normal directory from a repository. Okay, so when I say a repository, then you know that this folder has Git working inside it, or has the technology, the Git technology working inside it. Okay, so in simple terms, you can say that a repo, for short, we usually refer to it as a repo. A repo for short is just any folder or directory that has Git installed in it. Just take it like that in layman's term. For you to understand it, I usually break the concept very down, like to the barest minimum, so that you get a full understanding of it. So you can take it like that, that a repo is nothing but what a folder that has a Git technology in there. So right now, all the folders that you had on your computer, you can't necessarily call them a Git, a repository, because they don't have that Git technology in there. And you will see how we do this, okay? So that's the first thing you need to know, a repository. And we are going to be throwing that word around as often as possible. So the next thing that I need you to know about is what we call a working directory. A working directory. Basically, the working directory is that folder that you created. You know, folders in Windows, we usually say folders. So you are working in Linux, you are likely to be using directories. Okay, they mean the same thing, but that's how we are going to be calling it. And we usually use the command line for Git and for Git. Therefore, we'll end up calling this the working directory. The working directory is just the directory that you have created that you are writing your content inside. All your files that you are creating is in your working directory. So at any point in time when you are making changes, you are creating files, you are editing files, you are updating files, you are deleting files, you are working in what? Your working directory. The folder that you are going to create, or the directory that you are going to create and work inside, is known as your working directory. Just keep that in mind. Then, as I said, Git is a technology that helps you create versions of your code. Okay, so always before you create a version of your code, it's like, when I say version, it's like taking a snapshot of the code, because we want to be able to come back to it anytime that we want. So if today I work on this and I think, oh, it is working now, let me save this somewhere so that tomorrow when I come back to it, I can always have access to it. Even 10 years from now, I can always have access to this specific one. Okay, so what you are going to do is, like, you are going to take a picture of it, or take a snapshot of your working directory. So let's assume that this is your working directory where you are working. Okay, where the folder or the directory in which you are currently working, you want to be able to take a snapshot of what is there, so that in 10 years to come, even when you have added several lines of code, several files, new directories in there, you can always revert back to the specific point in time that you are referring to. So we are going to take a snapshot of it with the help of Git. All right. But before we do that, we have to raise this files, all the files that we have in here. We have to go and put them on a particular stage before we go and take the picture of them. You know, if you ever want to take a picture of somebody, you have to let them stand at a specific location or a particular place, let them dress up and pose for the picture before you take it. So all the files in your working directory have to be moved onto a stage. So I'll call this the staging area. staging area. So you have from your working directory to the staging area, you move your files from the working directory to the staging area. And when you do that, what this means is that you are about to take a snapshot of them. Please hold on, give me a few seconds. So just as I was saying, to be able to take a snapshot of it, you are moving your files from your working directory to the staging area. Then when you move the files from your staging area, when you take the snapshot, you are going to be keeping them in what we call your local repository. This is very important because that's what you are going to be doing all the time when you are working with Git. The first thing is, obviously, you are going to be having a directory in which you are working. You have a folder in which you are working, and that is your working directory. And you want to take a snapshot of what you currently have, the code that you currently have, so that you always, it's like creating versions. So at any point in time that you want, you can create a version that you can always refer back to, okay? And to be able to do that, I said it's like taking a snapshot of it. You are going to take a picture of it, assuming you're a photographer and you're about to take pictures of the things here. You move them onto a stage, okay? So there's like a stage. So a podium or a platform that you're going to put your files there so that you are ready to take a picture of them. Then as soon as you take the picture, they will move from the stage. That is, you've taken the picture. So now you're going to put the picture somewhere. The picture will be put here. We call it the local repository. The local repository is just the Git enabled directory inside your local machine, your own computer. Okay, you can decide to end it there, but then as I said, we create a website. I mean, we have a website called GitHub that we can keep all our files. So then we can decide that, oh, okay, this particular snapshot that I've taken, let me move it to GitHub, and that is known as a remote repository. Remote repository. So kindly pay attention to these four things. If you don't learn anything at all from today's session, make sure you understand these four things. So far as you understand them, working with Git will be a bit easy for you. All right. As for the extra commands, at any point in time, you can learn it. But this is the underlying information that you need to know to be able to appreciate how Git works. The first thing is that when you're about to work, obviously you're writing code, you're doing something on your computer as a software engineer, you are going to create a folder and keep them inside. That folder is known as your working directory. Then when you want to let Git start tracking your files, okay, that's the term that we use. Git tracks the file so that any changes that are made to it, it can record it. So if you want Git to start tracking your files, you have to move them to the stage. We call that the staging area. So you say you have to stage your files. Those are the terminologies that we use. Your files are currently in your working directory as you're working on them, but to be able to use them, or to be able to let Git track them, you have to stage them. So move the files. You can decide to move any of the files or all of the files at the same time. Move them to the staging area. Once you have them at the staging area, you can now commit them into a local repository. When I say you commit them into a local repository, all that I mean is that you take a snapshot of them and keep them in your local repository. So the terminologies, as you can see, is here. I use the word staging or stage your files. Okay, stage your files. Then from moving from the staging area to the local repository, I said you should what? Commit the changes. Okay, so commit the changes. That's what you are going to be doing. Then if you are now satisfied that, hey, I want to push this one to a remote repository, that is a repository that is not hosted on my computer, It's a centralized repository that any of us working in a team can push our code to. Which one common example that we are going to be using in this case is GitHub. But GitHub is not the only remote repository that we can use. In fact, it's not the only website that you can use to store your code. There are a lot of them, but we are going to focus on GitHub in this case. So to move your code from the local repository to the remote repository, you do what? You push it. Let me take that again. So starting from your working directory is just the folder or directory that you have created that you're working in. Then as soon as you want Git to start tracking your code, you have to move it to what? To the staging area. So we say you stage the code or stage the files. Once you stage the files, the next thing is for you to move them from the staging area to the local repository. How do you do that? You commit them. So by committing the files, you are only committing the ones in the staging area. That is, hey, let me move the items in the staging area to the local repository. That is committing. Then once you are done with that, you can go ahead and push the files. By pushing, you are pushing the files from the local repository to a remote repository. The reverse too can happen. Please, I'm just explaining terminology so that when I start doing a practical session, you will easily appreciate this. So kindly follow. We have staged, we have committed, we have pushed. Now, if I have code in my repository, the remote one, let's assume that a team member has made some changes to the remote repository. That's the code that we have on GitHub. Some of my colleagues have made changes to it. So I want to bring it down onto my local repository. The opposite of push is what? Pull. Don't forget that. So I can pull from a remote repository into my local repository. Remember that a remote repository in this case is GitHub. So the code that is on GitHub, if changes are made directly on GitHub, the website, or you have other colleagues pushing code there and you want to get the updated version, you have to go and what? Pull from the local the remote repository. Once you pull it, you bring it into your local repository and now you can get to work on it. Okay? So if you have any questions, you can push your questions in the comment section and I will address them as soon as possible. I just want to explain the terminologies, then we can easily take the questions. Seeing someone is saying the pictures are, what is it, blur or blunts? I don't really know. Blur. If it is blur, I don't know which pictures you are referring to. Is it a screen? Hopefully, can you all see the screen? Let me know in the chat, okay? The comment section. Can you see my screen with the illustrations that I'm doing? So with this in mind, we are going to start talking about some of the Git commands. Remember that these 4 places you need to know, these 4 important parts. I don't even know the term to use, but I mean, let's say this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4. So all the code, okay, so you can see my screen. Thank you very much. All the codes that we are going to be working with, I mean, the commands that we are going to be working with is going to be in relation to one of these 4, okay? So always pay attention to that. All right, so the screen is clear. The person who had issue with the screen probably is your network and you need to check it. Now let's move on to the commands. Please don't forget. I want to move on from this screen right now, the page that I'm on right now. Remember the working directory, the staging area, the local repository, and the remote repository. Working directory is the folder in which you are working right now. All the changes you are doing, all the files you are creating, deleting is inside your working directory. Staging area is where you put your files if you want Git to start tracking them. Then Once you've tracked those files and you've made changes to them, you can now move the files into your local repository by committing it. After you've moved them to a local repository, you can then push your code to a remote repository. Remember these four things. And now let's start talking about the Git commands. So Git commands that you need to know. Git commands. There are a lot of them, as I said from the beginning, and we are not going to be able to cover everything, but then the small ones or the ones that you really need that you are going to be using on a regular basis. So there are some of them that you will use once and you may not even need it again or once in a while. Okay, for instance, I didn't start talking about how to install Git and how to install Git on your computer, because if you are going to do it, it's just a one-time something and you can easily Google and find the process of installation. Okay, so I don't need to talk about that. There are few others that will only come in handy once in a while, maybe when you have a challenge. Okay, so I won't dwell much on that. I'm going to dwell on the ones that you are going to use on a regular basis, and make sure that you understand these ones, because every single day as you write code, you are going to be using them. All right, so let's start from here. The first command that I want to talk about is git init. Git init. Okay, that's the very first one I want to talk about. And what git init actually is git initialize. And as I told you earlier, a directory that has git underlying it, okay, a directory that has git initialized in it is called a repository. So if you create a directory, I think I should do the practical alongside my explanation so that it doesn't sound too theoretical. All right. So so just as I said, this session is focused on Git and GitHub, but I will also be showing you how to use some of the common Linux commands. Okay, so please pay attention to those ones as well. I just did something. There was some stuff on my screen that I didn't like, and I wanted to clear the screen to make it blank. What did I do? I typed the word clear. Okay, clear will clear your screen. So assuming ls is a command that we use to list all the files. Okay, list files, ls, list files. So when you say list ls, it's going to show you the files that you have here. And in Linux, when you have commands, you can pass options to them. So these options are usually preceded with a hyphen. If I say ls, you saw that it gave me a list of the files and folders or directories that I have on in the current directory that I am in. Okay, but if I want it presented, I could present it in a long form. So see this is a long form where it gives me extra information about each of the files. But what I wanted to come and show you is what I used initially, which is clear. Clear is a command that I can use to clear all of these and set me back to the first line. Okay, so if I go ahead and write clear and hit enter, you see what just happened. That's what I wanted to show you. Now let's get to our Git. So we need to create a folder, which is going to be our working folder, and use that for our explanation. To create a folder in Linux, you use the command mkdir, that is make directory. Okay, so mkdir, mkdir, make directory. Then give it the name, give the folder a name. So say git session. That is the name of the folder. Hit enter. So this folder has now been created. And when I do ls, you realize that in here, let's find the folder git session. Where is it? Okay, it's here. Git session is here. All right, so that is a folder that we have created. Someone is asking, can we use visual code? Yes, we can use visual code, but let's not get there right now. And I'll explain why. Let's not get there right now. Let's stick to what we are doing right here. Okay, so this is a command that we use to create a directory. Please pay attention. I've created a directory called git session. Now, how do I go into that directory or that folder? So if you were using a Windows machine, by creating this directory, it would have opened up a folder to show you, and you double click on it to open that folder. But in the command line, okay, in Linux, you have to use the command cd, where cd basically means change directory. Okay, and inside projects folder, I want to change my directory to the Git session. So all that I have to do is say Git underscore session. All right, then when I hit enter, it's going to take me there to that specific directory. Let me go back. Instead of typing everything here, there is a trick that you can do. There is an autocomplete in your command line. When you press your tab key, it will autocomplete it. So if I want to be fast enough and I start by typing cd and I start get underscore, I type, so what I just did was to tap my tab key, and the tab key brought the rest. Now I can hit enter. So you can see that initially I was just in my project directory, but now I'm inside project directory and the subdirectory Git session. That is where I am in. Let's do ls. When you do ls, you expect a list of the files inside there, but in this case, we don't have any set of files in. This is a new directory that we created. It's an empty directory. So that is why we didn't find anything in there. This one that we are working with is what we know as our working directory. But unfortunately, we are yet to initialize Git in here. So if we go ahead and use any Git command in it, it's not going to respond because it doesn't know the repository to be a Git repository. So one very common Git command that you need to be aware of is Git status. I'll use the Git init soon, but let me talk about Git status right now. Git status just gives you the status of your Git files, okay? Whether some changes have been made, and those changes that have been made, have they been staged yet, or have they been committed? You have some things that are yet to commit. That is what you get from Git status. Okay, so I presume that if I type the status of my Git files, okay, or the files inside my working directory, here it gives me fatal error and it says not a Git repository or any of the parent directories. So the problem is that I haven't initialized this directory that I created. It is not recognized as a Git repository. The only way I can do that is to say Git init. That means that I'm now telling this specific directory that I'm inside, I want Git to be, say, installed in here so that I can use it. But the right term is initialize Git in here. That means that we are giving this the ability to track files. Okay, so I am promoting it to become a repository. Initially, it was just an ordinary what directory, but by doing Git init, I am promoting it to become a Git repository. So hit enter, and now it says you have initialized empty Git repository because there is nothing in there. So that is why it says you have initialized a empty Git repository. If I go ahead and I do Git status, now it tells me that on branch main, no commit yet, nothing to commit. So you realize that initially when I did Git status, it gave me a fatal error because it wasn't a Git repository. Then I went ahead to do Git init. After doing Git init, I have now initialized that directory for it to become a Git repository. For that matter, I can now go ahead and check the status of any file that I have in here. So far we've talked about two Git commands. I've talked about Git init, that is used to initialize a repository. Then I've also talked about the Git status, that is used to check the status of the files. The files that you want to track, are they being tracked? Have they been committed or not? So that is what you use Git status for. The next command that I'm going to talk about is Git Add. And basically, Git Add is the command that you use to stage files. I hope you remember staging. So use Git Add to what? To stage files. If we go back to the page before, I explained that moving a file from working directory to your staging area is called staging. Okay, so to stage your files, you need to use the command git add. By now, you should have noticed something, that all the git commands are preceded with the word git. So never forget that. Git init, git status, git add. All right. So what I've shared with you right now is that if I have files inside the folder that I've created, the directory that I've created, and I want to start tracking it, I have to move it to a stage where we can now track it or take a snapshot of it. How we do that is to call that file with the help of git add command. So what you can do is say git add, then provide the name of the file that you created. But then you can also move all the files inside your working directory to the staging area. If you want to move all the files inside your working directory, including those inside the subdirectories in your current working directory, the fastest way or simplest way to do that is say git add, then a dot. In Linux, when you see the dot is representing your current directory. So where I am standing right now, I want to add everything in here. So that is what git add with a full stop will do, or the dot will do. Stage all the files that I have in this current directory. Okay. If I need to move a specific file, then I'll say git add, then pass the name of the file that I want to stage. Okay. So let's try this. First of all, we need to create a file before we can stage the file. So let me clear my screen. Let's create a file. So to create a file in Linux, there are several ways that we can go about it. There are a number of commands that we can use. If you want to create an empty file, the command that you use is touch. So you use touch to create empty files. If I say touch and I call test, okay, this has created a file called test. So let's do ls. You see that we have a file there called test. Okay, touch can be used to create a file. There are other commands that we can use to create a file. One common one too that you'll come across is echo. Echo ideally is supposed to use to echo something, print something to the screen. Okay, but with the help of some redirection, is it commands or flags, if I should call them, in Linux, you can use echo to create a file and pass content from the file, content into the file. So assuming I want to write something into a file, say this is just a file. Okay, that's what I can do. If I hit echo like this, it's just going to print this is just a file to my screen. Okay, it didn't create any file, it just printed it out. That's what echo does. But with the help of the redirection flags, I can use echo to echo this information into a new file. So if I do echo this is just a file, then I use the redirection symbol, this. That is what a greater than symbol. And write the name of the file. Say my file. Say that's the name of my file. With a redirection symbol, what's going to happen is that this echo with just one greater than sign is going to create this file, my file. Okay, but then if the file already exists, it's going to overwrite that file, and you're not going to have the previous information in that file. Okay, so sometimes you may see something like this, that is a double greater than sign. And the double greater than sign is important when you aren't sure if the file already exists and you don't want to override it. So if you don't want to overwrite the file and use echo in this case, it's going to append the information to the file, okay? But my focus here is just teaching you how to create a file with echo. So if I go ahead and I click enter, it has created a file. Let's do ls. Now we have two files. We have my file and we have test. We use touch to create the file called test. Then we used echo to create the file called my file. Now, how do we know the content of the file? So we have created my file. We said that echo will output this into the file that we created. For us to know the content of the file, we can go ahead and use a command called cat. So cat will help us output the content of the file. So let's call this file for it cat my file. And you see it's printing out what is inside it for you. This is just a file. So that's what you do with cat. So anytime you have a file and you want to see the content of that file, you can use cat as a command. Okay, then let's do cat on the very first one that we created, cat test. And you see nothing shows up. Why? Because we created an empty file with touch. So see the difference? You use touch to create an empty file. In fact, you can even create an empty file with echo. But what I showed you here is to echo a message into the file that you are creating. Another way to create files in Linux is to use a text editor. So we can use a text editor to create a file, any text editor, okay? So by default, for those of you who are ALX students, you know that in our training, you are being taught to use the default text editors that are available in your Linux terminal. And the default one that you have is VI. So here we can use VI to create a file. And what you do is say VI, then you mention the name of the file. So let's say my VI file. Okay, if I hit enter, it's going to open VI and create that file that we can work in. All right, so let's go ahead and open. This is VI. So just some simple things. I'm not going, as I said, the focus is on Git and GitHub. But I'm trying my best to explain some of these things so that you don't get confused, especially for you to know how all of these work together. Because you'll be writing code and you're going to use a default editor, which is in your case, if you are in ALS, you're going to be using VI. That is why we are using VI. You can also use Emacs. I don't think I have Emacs installed on mine, but then you can use Emacs, you can use Nano. So those are the commonly used text editors that come with your bash shell, okay? The interesting thing is that, and why ALS is focusing on you learning to use these default text editors is that when you are working with servers, mostly you will not have servers having all those extra code editors like someone made mention of VS Code. If you ever install a new system, by default, a new Linux system, by default, you have access to VI, but you have access to what? VS Code. And assuming that you're working on a machine that you are not the administrator, you can't do extra installations. The installations have been done for you. You are just working as a developer. And the only tool you have access to is VI. That means you should be able to work with it. All right. So at your own leisure, you can learn to use all the other fancy text editors. But for now, as you're beginning your journey, you have to learn how to use VI or Nano or Emacs so that anywhere you find yourself, even without any of those fancy text editors, you still will be able to write your code and use them as it should. To be able to use VI has two main modes, the command mode and the insert mode. Now, by default, when you open VI, it is in the command mode. If you want to type something in there, you have to switch to the insert mode. That is when you can insert something in VI. So how do I switch to the insert mode? Just by pressing I on my keyboard. Simple like that. So when I press I, now see I need. All right. So now you can see that I can type in here. Okay, because I've pressed I. This my VI usually also gives me problem. Okay, so then let's see what we can do. Type something in here. Here. Why is it not responding? Oh my goodness. Okay. My VI isn't responding to me, my commands right now. Let's see. Okay. So say here is my code. Okay. Then to save it, you use the escape key. By using the escape key or by pressing escape, you have gone back to the command mode. Okay, so that's what I've done right now. And press the column. Okay, press column and WQ. W is for write, Q is for quit. Okay, so when I say WQ, what I'm doing is that I am writing before quitting. That means you are saving before quitting. So that is why we have WQ. You are saving before quitting. Now I've quit, but the file has been saved. So if I do ls, you find that I now have my VI file also in here. I hope that makes sense. And we can open any of the files with VI. But as I said, you can use any other, text editor. Okay, any other text editor or IDE can be used. So in my case, on my Linux system, I have also installed VS Code, which I can use. So if I want to use VS Code to open any of the files, say my VI file as I have there, I'll just say code and type that, and it's going to open VS Code for me. Okay, so these are extra things that you can do, but all that I'm showing you, even with that, I can use VS Code to also create a new file. Assuming the file didn't exist, say my VS file, okay? My VS file doesn't already exist, but if I do this, it's going to create it and open it in VS. So if I save it and I go back to excuse me. Sorry, let me get water. Yeah, so those of you who have questions, you can put, maybe after I talk about Git Add, I'll start taking the questions. Then before we continue again. So kindly put your questions in the comment section. And those of you who joined as guests too, if you have questions, you can either unmute when I start taking the questions and ask your question, or you can also equally use the private chat to send your questions. Okay, sorry about that. So if I do ls right now, you can see that I have 4 files, which I have created with touch as a command. I created one with echo, I created one with VI, and I've created one with Visual Studio Code. Okay, so all of these are ways that we can create files, but then the code editors are just for you to be able to write your code. So the VI, the Nano, the Emacs that you are learning, you are going to, in fact, I prefer that you choose one. Now you've been exposed to all of, okay, I think they didn't expose you to Nano. I don't really remember. So mostly ALS mentions VI and Emacs. So between VI and Emacs, you choose the one that you want, then you work with that more so that you become acquainted with the codes and the commands. Okay, that is what you're going to be using for a very long time. But in this case, you permit me to use VS Code. Okay, you permit me to use VS Code so that you permit me to use VS Code so that I don't struggle so much here on this live. All right, because sometimes my VI can just freeze on me like that. So let's go back to our Git. What we're trying to do, let me clear my screen. I was trying to show you Git Add. Now let's use Git status. If you remember what Git status do, Git status is just to what? Show us the status of the files inside our working directory. Have they been staged? Have they been committed? Do we have some files that we need to commit or not? So Git status, it says on branch main, no commit yet. So it's telling us we haven't committed any file. And we have these untracked files. So it's telling us that all these files in red, we haven't tracked them yet. And if we want to do, we can use Git Add, then the name of the file to be in order to track them or stage them so that when we do our commit, the next commit, we'll be able to have them in our repository. Okay, I should have shown something, but then let's go on. So now let's say Git Add. I hope you remember Git Add is to stage a file. Let me just stage just one file. Git Add my file. So Git Add my file, click the enter key, and I've added that to my Git stage. I've staged that file. So it's inside the staging area right now. Let me do Git status, which will show you. Now you can see that on branch main, we have no commits yet, but changes to be committed. So these files have been tracked and they are ready to be committed. A new file has been tracked called my file and is ready to be committed. Please always pay attention. So the Git commands, some of them you may not even need to even memorize it. Here, now that I've staged it, if I want to unstage this file, if I no longer want this file in my staging area, there is a command here that I can use. Git rm. Rm is remove. Git rm -- cached. So you can use git remove, then with the option cached, pass the name of the file. And by so doing, you remove the file from the staging area. Okay, so if I go ahead and do git remove -- cached, then I say my file and do this. Okay, now let me do Git status again. We are back to what we had initially. There is no commits yet, and all of these files are untracked. Okay, so you see how important Git status is. It will always point you in the right direction. So never forget Git status. Now let's do Git add. I want to add everything. So just a dot or a full stop. Click enter. Then this has staged all the files. So now if I do Git status, sorry. You see that all these have turned from red to green. So they are being tracked. All right, we are being tracked. That is why we have, but I'm yet to do any commits. We are still working on our staging area. If I don't want these ones to be on the stage and I want to send them back to my working directory, I can just go and that is to unstage them. Use the same command here, git remove. So let's do git remove cached, then a full stop. A full stop means all the files that have been staged at the moment. Hit enter. Okay, so it is not removing unless you probably force it. Okay, remove recursively, then cached, then that. Okay, so now if I do git status, we are back to our red. Please, I hope you understand what is happening. That if you do Git status, I don't know if the color will remain the same everywhere, but if you do Git status, it tells you whether the files have been tracked or not. So if they've not been tracked, as you can see here, untracked files, it means you've not put them on the stage yet. As soon as you put them on the stage, as soon as you stage them with Git Add, then now they are being tracked and they are ready to be committed. Okay, so let's quickly get into it. Git Add full stop or dot. That means now we are tracking these files. Let's do Git status for the last time. You know that these are ready to be committed. So the next Git command that I'm going to introduce you to is Git commit. Git commit. And Git commit if you remember from the illustration here, the commit stage is when you move the files from the staging area to your local repository. That's so git commit is basically going to remove your files from the staging area to the local repository. That is what you are going to have. Give me a second, please. All right, sorry about that. So just as I said, the git commit will help us move the files from our staging area to the local repository. Let's get back to our terminal and see that in action. Okay. Let me first of all clear the screen. Now, so git status, just so that you keep an eye on what's happening. These files are ready to be committed. So if I do git commit, okay, you always have to pass a commit message. The message is just so you know what this commit is about. Remember that I said when you are committing, it's like you are taking a snapshot of it. So the message is like giving a name or a description to that snapshot that you are taking. Why did you take this picture? Okay, so when you are writing a code, maybe sometimes like after you have written, let's assume that these are, in fact, in ALS, most of the things that you'll be committing are solutions to a problem. So maybe I have solved, this is a solution to task 0. Okay, so I may want to pass a message that says that this is a solution to task 0. In fact, there is a resource in your ALS I mean, on the intranet, I think under the concept that talks about how to write very good commit messages. Your commit message should make sense not only to you but any other person. And when you read it, they should know exactly what you did, or if they do this, if they take that particular file, what is it going to do? Or if they do that commit, what exactly is all the files in there going to do? Okay, so sometimes you can just give a short message. In my case, I can say this commit, when issued, will what? Add say solution to task 0. Kindly give me a second. Let me pick this one. All right, so I say add solution to task 0 just to keep track of the fact that, oh, okay, the files that I committed at this point in time is solution to task 0. So I can go ahead and hit enter. Okay, so by hitting enter, this has committed the code. What does it mean it has committed the code? Now we have the code in the local repository. Okay, so if I do get status now, get status, it says no on branch main, nothing to commit. The working tree is clean. So I've moved all the files inside my working directory. I've currently been able to move all of them to my local repository. So before we go to how to push to the remote repository, let me pause here and take your questions. If you have any questions, let me quickly respond to the questions, okay? So just pause here and take questions. Those of you part of the stream, you can unmute and ask questions. Let me scroll back. What do we have?
Hello, Dr. Albert.
Hi.
Oh, good evening. Yes, I was going to ask, okay, when you were talking about the Git commit,
Okay.
when we were going to write the code Git commit -m, I don't know what does the -m means. Maybe I
Oh,
just
so
I need
yeah.
yes.
I needed to touch on that because of the call. It escaped me. So the git commit
Yes.
hyphen m is just an option to take a message. So it's for message. All right. So
Okay.
if you do the git commit without hyphen m, it will open your default text editor for you to type the message. But then
Okay.
if you want to go ahead and type your message and you bring hyphen m, then either
Um.
a single quote or a double quote, you write your message in there.
Then.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, that's how it works.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's
You're
my
welcome.
question.
All right, sure. All right, so those of you following on YouTube, if you have any questions, just put your question in there. Let's see. This person says, I tried creating a file, read it. I got error saying my URL link click, then ID. The next line also says I failed to bash command. I'm struggling to comprehend this. Kindly come again with a question. Happiness. If you are still here, kindly come again with a question. Is it you are trying to create a README file or what? I'm really struggling. All right. I'm stuck. Says what? I'm stuck at the point where it said we should update our Git. Are you referring to your intranet or what? Like setting up your intranet? I don't know. Where? What do you mean by we should update our Git? Please let your questions be comprehensive enough so that I get it. Okay. Let's see. This says, but we can use it to run our git command in the bash terminal and it will work and the checker will even check it and say it is correct. So what's the reason why we can't use it? Oh, okay. So I think this person is referring to this particular one, VS Code. Yes, I think someone's. Oh, so it's the same person. As can we use Visual Studio Code? And he came to say, but we can use it to run our Git. Yes, you can use it as I showed you. I can use Git, VS Code. You can use it. ALX is not going to penalize you for using it, but then it's a skill that they want you to acquire. Will you be able to work without the VS Code? Okay, and at least if for nothing at all, you should know one of those default text editors. You should know how to use at least one of them so that anywhere you find yourself, whether you have administrative access or not, you'll be able to work inside any terminal or, I mean, a shell that you are given. Okay, so please and please again, don't be in a hurry to go and use VS Code, especially those of you who had programming experience before joining ALS. You think it's a waste of time to be using VI and Co. But then try for now, at least for the formative years, doing your onboarding in the first 1 month of your session, stick to using the default text editors so that you master how to use them. Eventually, you are going to stop using them. Don't worry yourself. Okay. All right. Please, can you clone a non-empty GitHub repository? Yes, we can clone it. And when we get to that terminology cloning, I'll explain how you do that. Okay. Definitely. Okay, so this person answered. That's good. Oh, okay. So happiness have done it after the explanation. All right. Did I miss anything? All right. Yes. Okay. Christian, why do I like water? Water is life. Water is life. Okay. If I want to add an empty file, yes, to what? Like you want to add an empty file to what? So that's I've explained how to create an empty file. You can add an empty file, but I don't know why you would want to add an empty file. Please. Okay, so I've answered that. Says if I don't put hyphen M in git commit, is it still acceptable or is always okay? So just as I said, if you don't put hyphen M and you write something here, you throw an error before you write a message, it has to come. But you can equally do just git commit. But the interesting thing is that if you just do git commit, it will open your default editor for you to type a message. And until you type that message and save it, it's not going to commit. Okay, so the easiest way is to use the hyphen M. That is usually when you are just using some one line message. Okay, but if your commit message is going to be a lot of description, or like you're going to write a lot, then you can just use git commit or open the default text editor for you. Then you can go ahead and type everything that you want to type in there. All right. Okay, so um who is there? Says, Doc, what's the difference between Git and Bitbucket? All right, so just as I said, Git is an underlining technology that we use. Is it Gitbucket or Bitbucket? I'm not too sure, but I think that Bitbucket would be like GitHub, as I said earlier, is just a website where you push your repos, you save your repositories there. Okay, so basically, you can have Git is just an underlying technology that helps you do source code management or version control, source control management or version control management. Okay, but then we have a number of them. Yeah, I think it's Gitbucket, GitHub, those ones are platforms or websites where you can store or you can use them as your remote repository. So just keep that in mind. So Bitbucket or Gitbucket, however it is called, will be a remote repository. And I've illustrated from here the essence of the remote repository. Once you push your codes to your remote repository, you can have access to it anywhere you go, provided you remember your login details. So if I forget my computer here and I go for an interview and they want to see code that I've written, it is available. Just search GitHub, go to search for Ehonia Obed, and you'll find the codes that I've written. All right. So that's the essence of having a remote repository. Yo, my big boss is here. Just to I salute you. Okay. This is instead of cloning, you can as well use int get into to is it create a repository. Charles, it isn't so clear. If you clarify that for me, I'll be much grateful. Okay, how do I create a new branch? Okay, so I'll talk about them. We are now going, so you realize I've just gotten to commit, and hopefully I'll be able to touch on some of these soon. How do I delete a repo both locally and remotely? On If you want to delete a repo locally, you just use remove. Okay, so the remove command can delete the repo locally. Is just a folder that you have, or you can use git remove, so git rm to delete the repo, or you can use the linux command just rm to delete it. For the remote one, you have to go to that remote server or platform. If it is GitHub, go to GitHub and delete the repo from GitHub. Okay. How to use and push code to GitHub without using the ALX sandbox and the SSH and password. So that is also possible. And very soon you'll see how I do that. I'm going to push my code there. But there's something I'm not going to teach right now for those of you who will be interested in this particular part. You would have to establish a connection with the remote repository. So you have to establish a connection with GitHub. Your Linux machine has to have a connection, and you can do that through SSH. Okay, so those of you who are in the Telegram group, our Telegram group, I can probably share after this. I'll share the steps. Otherwise, you can easily Google and get the instructions on how to do the SSH connection between your Linux machine and GitHub. As soon as you do that, you can always always sideline the sandbox. So personally, I don't use the sandbox. I work on my virtual machine, which I'm using to write the code right now. Then I push directly to GitHub. And I don't know, the if you're in cohort 9, you haven't gotten there yet, I believe. When you start doing Vagrant, that's when you learn how to do it. So if you're in cohort 9 and you don't understand what I'm doing, I'm saying right now, don't worry so much. You'll get there. Okay, this session is actually supposed to be like a basic session just for you to understand. Probably I'll host later sessions and explain how to do every one of those detailed things to you. The Department of Software Engineering is GitHub a working station? When you say is GitHub a working station, I'm interested in where you're coming from and why the question. Okay, so I really don't know what answer to give you. So maybe you should elaborate. Let me know exactly what you are looking for. Get Init. So Charles, I think Charles, I asked you to. Okay, so instead of cloning, Charles was asking, instead of cloning, can I use Git Init to create a repository? Yes, and I'm illustrating it here for you to see. So Git Clone will, okay, let me, since the question is coming, I have to explain it. But Git Clone will download it will download your remote repository onto your local machine. Okay. But here, what we are doing is that we are using Git init to just initialize a repository inside our local machine. So they are kind of two different things. You are cloning when you have already created the repo and it's available on GitHub and you want to just download it onto your local machine. But here I am creating the repo from scratch on my local machine. That's when I use Git init. If you clone a repo, it's already a repo. So you shouldn't go and use Git init on it. But if you haven't cloned and you are creating from scratch, then you use Git init. I wish I'm going to lose track of all these questions. I wish we could compile these questions into maybe a document or something, then I can respond to them at a later time so that I don't take all the time trying to respond. So I'm going to take like two more questions, then I'll proceed to the other commands. How do I create a new branch? We'll talk about, okay, I think I've talked about this already. I went up again. Okay. All right. Okay, so I think now I can continue. The next command that's so those in here, if you have any questions, maybe when we come again, you can unmute yourself and talk or use the private chat to send me your questions. Okay, so the next command that I've noted here is the git push. And git push is going to help us push our codes or files to the Git repository that we have. Okay, but then let's go to GitHub. You remember what I told you about GitHub? It's just a website where we keep our files. Okay, we keep our repositories. So this is my GitHub page. If you are looking for me on GitHub, I just go by my full name here, Onya Obed, to create a repository. So you can come here, say, in fact, you can even use the new here. You can equally come here to look for your repositories. Then you find a new here. Okay, so let's create a new repository that we are working with. On the local one, how did we call that local one? So for those of you in ALS, almost all the time, ALS will give you the name of the repo. Okay, ALS will always give you the name of the repo. So we call this get session. Get session. So let's go back and create a new repo called get session. Get underscore session. Okay. So this that I've created, I didn't initialize anything. It's public. By now, I believe you all understand those things. So when you create a repo, they give you the instruction. Do you want to create a new repo on the command line? So if you are creating a new repo on the command line from scratch, then you can follow this step-by-step guide to do that. Okay. But if you have an existing repo and you want to push it from the command line, then these are the steps that you should use. Okay, so currently we have a repo that we have created that we want to push. All right, so to push it, we can do this. So I'm going to talk about git push, but before then, this is important. The code here says git remote add origin, then this link. Let me explain what that means. Git remote add. You remember what the remote repository is? Okay, so by saying git remote add, it means that I want to tell my code or my repository where the remote repository is, so that at any point in time when I say push, it knows where to push it to. Right now, the repository is a local repository. It is not connected to any remote repository. If I want to connect it to a remote repository, that is when I use git remote add. Then the origin is this. What this means is that you're writing some link here, HTTPS, blah, blah, blah. What this means is that from now onwards, anywhere you see origin, okay, origin is actually representing this link. Pay attention to that. If I go ahead and issue this command in my terminal right now, what I'm telling my repository is that origin always represents this link. Then I am adding this link as my remote repository. So that is where I want you to be pushing my code to. So all that I need to do right now is to copy this, okay? Then go back to my, let me clear the screen here. Clear. Oh, say clear. Then do, so I've pasted what I copied, git remote add origin, then the link. Remember that the link is just https github.com, your username. So in my case, Ewonia Obed, then the name of the repository, git_session.git. Hit enter. So now I've added a remote origin. That means that my repository now knows where to push my code to. Okay, so we can go back and follow the next thing. The next thing is the branch. So probably I should talk about branch here right now. Basically, what the branch is when you are working. So when we started, I gave an example that we may be working on multiple with multiple people. Okay, so let me go to this place and illustrate it. When we are so far, we are working in, like, by default, you are working in one branch. You should always remember it. By default, you are always working in a particular branch, and all the changes that you are making is being committed to this branch. All the changes you are making is inside this branch. Okay, but let's assume that after you have pushed the code, let's say you've committed to this branch, but you want to test some code. You're not sure if it's going to break what you have currently or not. And some of your colleagues are also working on it remotely. For that matter, what you can do is, let me take a copy of what I have here and go and test it somewhere else. So this is like, hey, I want to copy the files that we are all working on and work on it somewhere else, test all the new things I want to test. Then if eventually I see that it is working, then I can come and what, merge it with the main one. Because I don't want to destroy the flow. I don't want to break any code that we are currently working on. So let that remain. And usually by default, we are working with what we call the main branch. Previously, it used to be called the master branch. So depending on when you created your GitHub account, you may either be working with a master branch or a main branch, and they are basically like the same. That's by default. So you can create a branch and call it anything that you are going to work on. And when you create that branch, what it means is that you're going to be working on, in eventually, let's say you make some changes and you think now it's okay, you can then go ahead and merge it with the original branch. Once you create this branch and you have not pushed it there, you are working on it locally, your colleagues will not have access to it. They are using just the main one. But eventually you can merge your codes into the main one and that is the essence of branching. Okay, it becomes like it comes in handy when you are working in a team where a lot of you are working on the same code. So please pay attention. Eventually, those of you in ALS, when you start doing your team collaboration, especially if it is more than two people, you see the essence of branching. But for now, we are just saying that, hey, our main branch should be the branch that we push to. Okay, so copy this, then okay, I even have it here. Hit enter. Great. Then the last thing to do is push to the main branch. So that is how we use the push. I could say git push, but you could also go ahead and specify exactly where you want to push it. So by using the use, like you're setting the upstream that this is where I want you to go to. You remember that I said origin is this URL that we have created because that's what we added as the origin. So it knows that I'm supposed to push every code here in this local repository to this origin. Then you also mention the branch. Okay, so you could have done it with just git push. And that's if you have set it. Let's say after I've set this already, all the ones that I'm going to do by default, because I've set an upstream, by default is going to go into Origin's main branch. So I could have decided to push it to a different branch. I could have decided to push it to a different repository. But once I set an upstream, it means that going forward, anytime I use git push, it's going to push to the origin that I created and the specific branch, in this case, main. So hit enter. Oh, yeah. So this is also one thing I should have started from the beginning. But these are usually one-time settings, so I hardly do them. What do I mean by that? It's asking for your username and your password. When you push your code, okay, which username should you use? And I mean username and email. Which email should you use so that when you go and see your commit messages, probably I should open a previous repo, any of these. The commit messages. Ooh, last commit. So let's just check the insights. You see something here? Commits. So basically what I'm trying to show you right now is that it takes note of the username. Okay, here I'm the only one pushing, but it becomes important when you are working in teams. We'll be able to track who committed what with their username and their email. So any name that you want to be identified with your commit messages, that's what you're going to be typing here. So I will just enter my username, then password for this account. Okay. So here, oh, I've even forgotten that it will not show my password. Okay. Woo! I didn't expect this. So I'll need to connect. It means that over here, I haven't connected to my GitHub account yet. I thought I was escaping that because it's just a one-time thing that you need to do. So here, you can use your personal access token to have done that. So when I was adding my git remote add origin, instead of using just the link, I should have created a personal access token and added it to it before I do this. Please, do you understand? GitHub now doesn't really use the password and username stuff. They use the PAT, that's your personal access token, to authenticate. Okay, so the URL that we used, which was https this github.com slash, because of the time I'm really in a hurry and that's what is happening right now. Near obed slash, then there's name. Okay, so .git, that's the URL that we use. But prior to having this here, you should introduce your PAT here. and hopefully if you are in ALS, even the cohorts now, I believe now you've learned about PATs. Okay. If you don't know what a PAT is, you probably just, I don't want to go into this right now. But I mean, if you don't know what a PAT is, you is your personal access token and how to use it. Just Google that so that I can focus on using the using like teaching you the commands. Okay, I can do this, but it may take some time, and I don't want to spend the time on it. So what I'm going to do right now is switch to this repo, which I've already done. But the concept that I'm explaining is when you are setting your remote the origin, okay, when you're adding the origin, instead of just using this, add your PAT so that it knows exactly where to connect to. Okay. The next thing to do now. Oh, let me go to my terminal. So cd back to projects, then cd into my PLD. I think there is okay. Was this C programming? All right, then cd into PLD. Oh, don't I have a PLD? Oh, ls. So where is that? cd backwards ls. Oh, right now that I'm in a haste, I can't even find what I'm looking for. ls. Is it here and I can't find it? It's not here. So it should be in C programming, ls. Wow. Okay. So from what I'm getting here, let's see. I want to choose any of my repos, then work on it. But I think I should have. Where is that one? Okay. So what I can do right now, just to teach the clone, let me just go ahead and clone this repo. I don't know why it's not there, because it's supposed to be there. So usually when you create a new repo, okay, you can easily copy the link here and use it to clone. Let me try cloning my repo. That one too, I'll need a PAT. Oh, come on. Please permit me to grab my PAT, okay? Docs, so that I can easily go ahead with this. So your PAT shouldn't be public. Kindly take note. It shouldn't be public. You should keep it as much as possible, like secrets. PAT, where is it? Okay. Um, so let's see. Since I'm done with this, I think I can go ahead and use it. Okay. So I've copied the PAT. Let me clear. See, paste. So unfortunately, it didn't even take time to. So what I did here, please pay attention. What I did here was Git Clone, then the URL. But this time around, hey, goodness, I have to go and remove this PAT. Shit, I have to go and remove this PAT. All right, so I have to delete my PAT after here. But what you can see right now on my screen is me cloning with the help of my PAT. Okay, so if I do ls now, you find that I've gotten a new repo here or directory here, the ALS. So let's cd into that ALS this. Okay, good. Then I have a lot of files in there. So over the period working in ALS, these are the things that we have done. I'm going to create a directory in here, call it Git sessions, that we are going to use for the rest. Git session. I should have planned before this. Okay, so let's cd into Git session. All right, then clear my screen. Okay, I thought I authenticated it earlier, so I wasn't going to need my POT. That's why I didn't cover it. Okay, so now let's create a file. Usually in ALX, you'll be asked to create a README file. Okay, so say this is a sample. I'll even want heading, say sample README file. Okay, I think yesterday someone was even asking me how to do this. Then MD. So this is how you are going to create your README file with some information. You can equally use a text editor. You can use Touch to do it. Then I click on this. So I've created a file. Let's do ls. The file is there. I want to push this, but the first thing you need to know is that currently, if you check Git status, you see they are untracked files. They are untracked files. Remember that this we are inside a repo. Okay, so what we'll do is what we'll do right now is say right, I think I'm coming. Let me go back and check the status of this. Oh, okay. So if the fastest way to go about this. Please don't get confused here, okay? And I think some of you will be experiencing it because in ALX in particular, this is how you are going to be working. You have like one big repo and you have different directories. So currently we are inside the repo called ALX low level programming, and I'm seeding into the folder that we created. Okay, that's what I'm seeding into. We have created a file called readme, but we are here to track that file. So if you want to track it, the first thing you need to is to stage by doing git add, then we add this. But then already the file that we created, so when you check the git status again from here, you realize that the directory that we created called git session has not been tracked yet. That's why we have this. So if we want to track it, we have to do git add, then we do this. That means now we are tracking this particular directory and everything inside it. Okay, so now if I do git status, it's telling me that this file is being tracked and I can go ahead and commit it. Okay, so commit, git commit, then my message will be add readme file. Enter. Then now I can just do git push. Okay, so if I do git push, hopefully my code is in here. Well, oh, the ALX repo, yes. So you can see updated 15 seconds ago. So let's go in there and look for the directory that we created. The directory was called get session. Okay, here it is. 27 seconds ago, get session. So that is what we created. And in here, we created a readme file. This is the readme file. Okay, so now we've looked at get status, get init, get add, get commit, get push. Let's talk about two more or three more commands, very important commands. Get fetch, get merge, get pull. So what get fetch does is that it goes to fetch, as the name suggests, it goes to fetch everything on your remote repo onto your local repo. Okay, get merge will merge the two repos, the remote one and the local one, or merge them so that if there are any differences, we'll be able to synchronize them. But Git pull, on the other hand, does both of them. It fetches and merges them. So instead of doing just git fetch, git merge, what you do is git pull. So git pull will pull and merge the changes. If you don't do git pull and you do git fetch, after doing git fetch, you have to also do what? Git merge. So for instance, here we can go ahead and edit using GitHub, the website. Okay, so I can go ahead and I added this line on GitHub. Then let's go ahead and commit. So you can write your commit message here. If you don't change it, it would save the update readme.file as your commit message. So commit changes. Great. So now we've made changes to this, but we don't have it on our local. How do we know that we don't have it on our local? Let's open the file that we have. The file we have here is called readme. So we can use cat to open readme.md, and it has only one line in there. So we don't have the new changes that we've made on our remote server. How do we get it? We can get it by doing git fetch. But if you do git fetch, it will pull it down, but it will fetch them, but not merge it with the one that we currently have. So we'll then have to do git merge. But to avoid all of them, you do git pull. We do git pull, and now it fetches and merges them. Okay, so if I go ahead and I do cat readme, now we should have the new changes that we made. I added this line from GitHub. I hope that makes sense. So we use the git pull. What it does is to fetch from GitHub or your remote repository, then merge it. So that's an easy way. Instead of going to do git fetch and git merge, you can easily jump to git pull. So if you are working in groups, anytime before you make your commit, you always have to try and pull, because somebody might have updated it. So in order to get the updated version of your work, always you have to git pull before you do your own commit. Okay, so that's just by the way. The next command, git clone. So I've talked about git clone, and what I said about git clone was it helps you download the file from the remote. Please pay attention. With git pull, we already have the repository, and we are using it to fetch the changes that are on, or the updated file, the current file on that repository, the remote repository. But when you are using git clone, you are actually downloading the whole repository. So git clone is for what? Downloading the repo. Okay, so that's what you do with git clone. You use it to download the repo onto your local system. Then I've told you that git clone, you have to give it the URL. So you have to say git clone, then pass the URL of the URL of the repo. Okay, so HTTP something. But then in order to authenticate it so that when you are pushing, you can easily push to it, you should use your PAT. So in that case, it will be HTTPS : this, then put your PAT here. Okay, so you replace this whole thing with your PAT. Then it would be, is it at, yes, I think it's at github.com/ your username. So put your username in there. There's no spaces, please remember. Your username in here. Then you have repo name here, repo name, ending with .dit. So that would be the easiest way to clone. And I said cloning is what? Downloading the remote repository onto your local device or onto your own computer. Okay, so that is Git Clone. Let me quickly walk through a few others, then we can take questions. So with a few others, we can talk about fetch, a terminology that you are likely to hear a lot when you are working. No, that's not. So I've talked about fetch already. The terminology I was going to talk about is fork. Okay, fork is a terminology that you are going to hear a lot. And basically, what fork means is that a repository that belongs to somebody, if you want to have it in your own remote repository, please pay attention. With clone, you were downloading it onto your own computer. Okay, but with fetch, assuming you have come here, and let me just go to this place. Okay, let's do this. See, let me show you something. Probably somebody. Oh, I'm not saying, but then if you check my repos, okay, if you check all the repos that I have, and you are interested in a specific repo, let's say this, you want to have it in your own GitHub account, what you will do is to fork it. I'm just trying to explain the terminology here. Okay, so you fork that repo. So if this is the repo that you want inside your own GitHub account, the terminology that we use is you fork it. But if you want to download this repo, if you want to download this repo onto your local machine, then you are what going to clone. Okay, so that is how, or the meaning of those two things, clone and forking. Cloning is downloading onto your local machine. Forking is creating a copy on in your GitHub account. Okay, then we also have a command called Git Log. It gives you a log of all the commits that you have created. Okay, so this is all the commits that I have done in this particular repo. Okay, so I can get access to it. I need to. So there are a lot of them here because this repo is really a huge repo. We've been using it for almost all the ALX stacks. So you should understand why it's like that. Okay. Then the next, so Git log will just give you a log of all the how do I call it? All the commits, the logs of all the commits that you have created. Okay. The next one, branches. I think I've mentioned branches earlier, but to create a branch, we use Git checkout. Okay. So Git checkout can be used to do two things. To create a branch, if the branch doesn't exist, you'll say Git checkout, then -b, then the name of the branch, say new branch. Okay. This will create the branch if it doesn't exist. But if the branch already exists and you do Git checkout new branch, what it means is that you are switching from one branch to the other. If I do Git checkout main, it means I am switching to the main branch. Okay, so pay attention to these ones. Git checkout is what we are going to is going to help us create a branch. We add the option -b when we want to create a new branch. And if we want to just switch to that branch, we ignore the hyphen. Okay, the -b in here will create and switch. Okay, with the Git checkout, -b will create and switch the branch. Okay, then one question that I need to answer, some of you have been asking, is the README file. What does it do? Okay, so README basically is just like any file, but it's the file that you create to tell people about what your repo is about. What is this project about? What do you put in here? So you can tell them the kind of code that you are reading. So if I come to your project, say this, okay, see, this is for project on C programming for my ALX Software Engineering Program. It could be as comprehensive as possible, but this is just a short one that I've written. So that anybody at all who comes in to see this repo knows that, oh, okay, this repo is actually for projects on C programming in ALX Software Engineering Program. Okay, but you could make it elaborate as possible. So for each of them, I think for each directory, ALX asks you to create a readme file. So I say this directory contains solution to tasks on the hello world project. You can actually go and write the details. What is it? What exactly did you do? What, so that anybody at all who is reading it will get the information on what it is that you have in there. Okay, then so I think this is a good point to pause and take questions. I've been speeding, I know, but I'm getting tired and I can't cover everything. So hopefully I'll do another session and take you that I could probably slow down and take you through. Okay. But hopefully this is a good introduction to especially the cohort 9 members or any other person who didn't understand the concept of Git and GitHub. So a quick recap of what Git is. I said that or what, no, not even what it is, what, how it works, the four things that you need to remember if you ever forget. I explained these four things. You have your working directory. Okay, you have your working directory, you have your staging area, you have your local repo, then you have your remote repo. Okay, so for here, from the working directory, if you want to move your files to the staging area, you do what? Staging. How do you stage? You stage by using git add. Okay, that's the command you use. From the staging area to the local repo, you do what? You commit. How do you commit? By using git commit. And don't forget your commit message. Then from the local repo to the remote repo, you do what? You push. So you use the command git push. If you are going the other way around, that is from your remote repo, you are trying to fetch the changes to your local repo, you do git fetch. But after you fetch, you have to what? Git merge, to merge the changes in the remote repo into the local repo. But both of these can easily be done with a single command called git pull. So if you don't remember anything at all, in fact, let me add Git Init as the very first thing that you did when you created your folder. So if you don't remember any command at all from this 2-hour session, remember that Git Init is used to initialize a Git repository. Git Add is used to move your files from the working directory to the staging area. Git Commit is used to move files from the staging area to the local repository. Then Git Push is used to push, sorry, it's push. Git push is used to push the files from the local repository or the changes from the local repository to the remote repository. Then you can fetch changes from the remote repository using git fetch and git merge, but you can equally do that with git pull. And I've also explained git clone and the difference between git clone and forking. Forking is when you are creating a copy of the repo on your GitHub account, but cloning is when you are downloading a copy of the repo onto your local machine. Thank you all. Let me pick questions. So those of you joining me in house, you can use a private chat or ask your questions by unmuting and asking. So if you have any questions, put it in the chat, the comments. Let me respond to that. What do we have here? Okay, so if I'm cloning another person's repo, do I need to add my PAT and username? So the moment you use your PAT and your username, okay, so let's get the moment you use your PAT and your username, where is this? Let me go there. This, please pay attention here. The username here is part of the URL to get the repo. So if you are cloning somebody's repo and you use your username, it will tell you that the repo does not exist. Because what is going to happen is that we are actually searching for github.com, this username, that's a URL, and looking for this name, repo name. So the code is actually going directly into your own GitHub account and searching for a repo with the name that you gave, which doesn't exist on your repo or on your GitHub account. So it's going to throw an error. But you have to use the person's username. So right now, if you want to try, assuming you want to clone any of my repos, what you have to do is copy this link, okay? And you see that this link here is what github.com. So in fact, if you open any repo at all, say let's open this repo. When you come to code app here, click this and it gives you the cloning options. You can use HTTPS, you can use SSH or the GitHub CLI. So if it is the HTTPS and I copy this, you realize that what I copied, let me paste it here. There's what my username. If you change this to your username, it's like asking Git to go to your own GitHub account and go and look for a repo called ALX this, which doesn't exist. So that is wrong. So what you will do is you'd have to put my username there because you are cloning from me. But then the PAT that you are going to use here should be your own PAT. If you use your own PAT, then it means that eventually when you are going to push, you can push to your own account. But after cloning, you would have to reset your remote origin to your own account, a repo on your own account. Okay? And if you are resetting, that means you probably have to go and create a new repo on your account. To avoid all of this, if you are going to clone someone's account and you are not a contributor, so if you are a contributor, that is easy. You are contributing directly to the person's account. If you are not a contributor, just fork it onto your GitHub, then you clone from your GitHub. That would be the simplest way. If you are a contributor, you just need to use your personal access token, use the person's username. Then when you push your code, it will go into the person's repo if only the person has added you as a contributor. Otherwise, if you want to do something like this, I will advise you fork it into your GitHub and you clone it into your local device. But then in ALS, you have to be careful not to fork anything that the checker is going to be checking. Okay, please and please again, don't go and fork a repo that you are going to submit to the checker. Checker will always look out for repos that are forked, and I don't know how it's going to penalize you, but I think along the line they give us instructions that we are not supposed to fork. I haven't tried it before, so if you have the desire to try it and see, you may go ahead. But my advice is that don't fork something you are submitting. Okay, even if you fork it, create your own repo, then move your code to that repo that you have created, so that it's like a new repo. Any other question? Otherwise, we'll bring our session to an end. Any question? You're welcome. Oh, this hasn't been easy. Running for 2 hours. Yeah. So if there are no questions, thank you all, especially those of you from cohort 9. And I think some of my cohort members and cohort 8 members also joined. Thank you. I appreciate your time. Hopefully, we would have more sessions. Those of you from cohort 9 who just try and keep in touch. I think I've asked someone to have a group for cohort 9 members, so you can join. But then you can always reach out to me. Maybe I should let me put my Twitter handle there. If you want I don't like sharing the link publicly. So if you want to join the how is it called? Our Telegram group, okay? Just send me a hi on Twitter and I would just send me a hi on Twitter and I would respond to it. I'll share the link to join the group with you. Okay. So there is a question from a private session. How do you face a conflict? So to face a conflict, it depends on the conflict that you have, okay? And usually the good thing about Git is that it will even give you, in fact, you can use Git status, you get the steps to face the conflict. You just need to read the message and understand. Maybe I'll have to have a session where I come to talk about it. Please, a link to the Telegram, just hi me on Twitter. I'll send it. I don't want to share it in the public so that not just anybody at all enters the group. All right. So hi me on Twitter. I'll send you. I should explain more on Git resets. It depends on if you are resetting the head or just let me see. Please, let me. I'm trying to think of the fly right now and see when next I can come and respond to all of these or do like detailed sessions on how to manage these errors and conflicts and things. But currently, until next week, I don't have any free time. In fact, I'm jumping on to another session right now. That is why I have to jump soon. I have to move soon. I have another session. So what is going to happen is that those of you in touch with me, let's plan some time where we'll come and solve these issues. That's why I was saying I wish we could keep track of the questions that came that I couldn't tackle. But then if you happen to join the group, you can bring up your questions. I'll try and collect them and respond to them at an appropriate time. Okay, please and please again, I have to jump off onto another meeting. So thank you all for your time. Thank you, and I hopefully will meet you some other time. Okay, the origin, don't worry. You can rewatch the video, but I'll meet you at another time. Thank you so much for your time. Bye bye. So we meet again.